Hello everyone. So we'll start from where we left last time. We discussed major and minor losses, and we discussed this mainly on the basis of the Bernoulli's equation. We added these terms HF and HM on the right hand side of the Bernoulli equation. We also said that because our velocity profile is not uniform throughout the pipe, it is a paraboloid or parabolic in case of two parallel flat plates. Therefore, we need to write some correction factor here, which is this alpha that we have written. Okay. So now what does this alpha do? Let's say we are talking about this pipe where the velocity profile is parabolic. If we apply Bernoulli equation for the center line, then we don't need to worry about this correction factor alpha if we use the velocity of the center line. But usually in pipe flows, we don't know the maximum velocity or the center line velocity. What we know is the average velocity. How do we get to know the average velocity? If you want to know the average velocity in a pipe, we can have different kinds of flow meters, or what we can do is we can keep a bucket or a tank at the end of this tube and let the fluid fall into this and notice the time in which a certain volume is filled. Okay. And also we know the cross sectional area of this pipe and you will get the volume flow rate from here, from this bucket. So volume, that is meter cube per unit time. Okay. How many meter cubes are filled in this bucket per second? And we know the cross sectional area that we can divide square. Okay. So what we get ultimately is the average velocity in the pipe. We don't get to know the maximum velocity, we just know the average velocity. Also, if there are bends in the tube, then this velocity profile will be different. Okay. This velocity profile, the maximum in the velocity will not be exactly at the center. It may be shifted somewhere else. So even if you want to use a probe, let's say, to measure the velocity at a point here, and you want to drill a hole and put a probe like that, even then we are not sure whether we are measuring the actual center line velocity or something else. So generally we know this average velocity and we take that in place of V1 here. We don't usually in practice put the velocity at the center line in this Bernoulli equation. So that's why we need this correction factor even more. For laminar flow, because you can see that the velocity here is very different from velocity here, and the average velocity and the maximum velocity relation also you know for this. So for a cylindrical pipe, this alpha factor that you get, you can derive it also, that you get as 2. Okay. This is for laminar pipe flow in a cylindrical pipe. And for turbulent flow, this is about 1. Okay. And how to derive this? We can just use the energy conservation between 2 points 1 and 2. Let's say this is cross sectional area 1 and this is cross sectional area 2. We can integrate, we can take a small cross sectional area dA, small element in that cross sectional area, integrate it for that entire cross sectional area at point 1. Okay, and this should be equal to something that we are writing in terms of average velocity. So here we are writing the average kinetic energy. So how is this kinetic energy? Kinetic energy is mv square, right? Half mv square. This is the mass flux, rho times velocity times dA. Okay. So basically, because we are writing in terms of density, density is mass per unit volume. This V that we are writing here is velocity, that is not volume. How do you get the volume per unit time? You can multiply velocity with the area of cross section. That gives you the volume per unit time that is traversed by the fluid particles, right? Because what is velocity? Velocity is meter per second. So how many meters a fluid particle travels in 1 second? So that length multiplied by dA gives you the volume. So volume per unit time. So that gives you the volume covered per unit time, basically. So here you get the kinetic energy. Okay. And if you want to write that same thing in terms of average velocity, then you can write this times dA. But these two will not be equal, of course, because velocity and average velocity are different. This is also integrated over the entire cross-sectional area A. So you have to multiply some factor alpha here with V bar square by 2, which can come out of the integral also. And you know the velocity profile for a pipe flow, that is a paraboloid that we have derived earlier, that you have derived actually. Okay. So this factor comes out to be 2 for a laminar flow. And how is it 1 for a turbulent flow? Because for turbulent flow, the profile that you get is not parabolic, it is almost uniform. So there is a change near the wall and almost in the entire cross section, the velocity is uniform, the time averaged velocity. Of course, there are fluctuations in the velocity because turbulent flow is unsteady, it is chaotic. But still, if you see the average in time, it is uniform velocity. So you get alpha approximately equal to 1. It can be 1.1 or 1.01, something like that. For highly turbulent flow, it will be close to 1. Okay. So now these losses are done. Now, how do we overcome pipe losses? There will be pipe losses. Let's say you have a refinery and from there you want to run a pipeline from one country to another country or from one state to another state. Just by using height differences in the pipe, you will not be able to transport the fluid at a high velocity. There will be losses in the pipe, the fluid will slow down. Okay. So if you want to flow the petrol or diesel or crude oil in a pipeline, you need pumps. And not just one pump will do it. You need pumps at regular intervals to overcome the pipe losses. Okay. So from point 1 to point 2, if you want to transport some fluid, you will need pumps in between. That's how they do it. So these pumps, what they do is they increase the head of the fluid. They generate a head difference. Okay. So let's say the head here at point 1 is this P by rho g plus V square by 2g, or alpha V bar square by 2g, which is the average velocity, plus Z. Okay. What this pump does is it adds H pump, let's say, at this point 2, let us call it. So at point 2, the head will be this. This pump will add some HP to the head. And then there will be a loss from this point to this point because of the length of the pipe. So at point 3, you will get this thing minus HF. Okay. And then again, this second pump will add HP at point 4. And then again, in the entire pipeline after that, there will be losses minus HF2 maybe. So is this clear? How a pump adds head to the fluid, it adds some energy to the fluid, and then how the losses take place in the pipe and how both of them counteract. Is there any question in this part? Okay, so we'll move ahead. Now you can notice one thing here. Okay, so now if we have to write this equation for a pipe segment containing a pump, how do we write it? Between point 1 and 2. So let us write it between points 1 and 2. P1 by rho g plus alpha 1 V1 square by 2g plus Z1 equal to P2 by rho g plus alpha 2 V2 bar square by 2g plus Z2. And then we wrote plus HF last time because there are some losses between point 1 and 2 because of the pipe, because of the fittings, valves, whatever losses. So HF are the major losses because of the friction factor in the pipe. Plus there can be several smaller losses, sigma HM we can write. So from different fittings, valves, bends, whatever. And then we want to write this H pump also. So where will it be added, this H pump? On the right hand side or the left hand side? Can you please write in the chat? Assuming that H pump is a positive quantity, where should that be written? So right hand side or left hand side? Okay, if you see this, because HF and HM, these are the losses and we are writing them on the right hand side. So of course, because H pump has an opposite effect, so it must be on the other side. So if you take it to the right hand side itself, then you have to write minus H pump. So this is the entire equation where you have losses as well as some devices which add the head to the fluid. Okay. So this one is the Bernoulli equation with all the devices and the losses. Now if you see the unit of Z2 or any other term, then that is height. That is what we discussed. SI unit is meters. And this unit can be expressed in another way also. We can think of it in terms of work per unit weight. Okay, work per unit weight or energy per unit weight. So energy per unit weight also has the same unit, that is of height, because you know that the potential energy is mgh and weight is written as mg. Okay, so finally you get just the height. So this can be written as work per unit weight. And why are we writing this as work per unit weight? Because we want to calculate the work done by the pump. So we want to write that in terms of this H pump. How is the head that the pump adds to the fluid related to the work that the pump does, or the energy that we provide to the pump in terms of electrical energy? So the work done per unit time by the pump can then be written as mgh pump. Okay, so I have taken this m dot g to the right hand side from this work per unit weight. So this was work by pump divided by m dot g, which goes to the other side and it becomes work pump equals mgh pump. Now you can take all the other terms together and you can write h pump equal to these terms. Okay, and if we are talking about just the pump, if we don't consider the entire pipe, if we consider just the point the inlet of the pump, which is also known as the suction side of the pump. This is the pump and this is the outlet. This is point 2. This is also known as the discharge side of the pump. So suction and discharge. So here we don't have much pipe length to worry about. We are just focusing on the inlet and outlet of the pump. So we can neglect these HF and HMs. We can just focus on H pump. So H pump can be written as P by rho G plus alpha V square by 2G plus Z on the discharge side minus P by rho G plus alpha V square by 2G plus Z on the suction side. Or you can take this G also inside, then this G will cancel out and you will get ZG here, ZG, and these two G will also cancel out. So this is how you can get the work done by the pump. on the fluid. This is the head raised for the fluid. Okay. And if you want to calculate the efficiency of the pump, which can be represented by eta, that can be calculated as work done by the pump per unit time, which is W dot pump, divided by the work that you put in to the pump. So that can be the electrical work or the physical work that you do on the pump. So that gives the efficiency of the pump. And then you can plot these different diagrams for efficiency versus mass flow rate, or efficiency versus um, the pressure in the fluid, or the velocity of the fluid, the average velocity, and so on. So these different plots are given by the manufacturers of the pump to let you know when will the efficiency be highest, when will the work done by the pump be highest, and so on. So where to operate basically. Okay. So this was about pumps. Is there any question in that? Okay. So this pump comes, this pump actually is part of the devices known as, or the machines known as, fluid moving machinery. They move the fluid. What other fluid moving machinery do we know of? So the fan or the cooler that you have at your homes, so those are also fluid moving machinery because they move the fluid. Which fluid do they move? Fans and coolers move air. Okay. So fans, blowers, okay, pumps, all of these are fluid moving machinery. So a similar analysis can be done for fans and blowers also. They just move air instead of a liquid. All right. So now we come to flow measuring devices, which we have discussed to some extent. There are different flow measuring devices. What do we mean by flow measuring? We mean velocity and pressure. The devices which measure velocity and pressure. Some devices can measure velocity, some can measure pressure, and from some you can deduce both. So these are pitot tubes, or just pitot, venturi meters or venturi tubes, orifice, orifice plate or orifice meter, rotameter, or hot wire anemometer. Okay. So what are these? We will discuss a little bit. Pitot tubes are generally used in airplanes. They may be used anywhere. The principle is that you get the fluid, you get the fluid's velocity as well as pressure. So how do we do that? Let's see. Okay. So I am showing just a cross-sectional view of this. This is actually a cylindrical tube. Okay, if you rotate this thing, this is a cylindrical tube. There is a central hole, which is this one. Let's say the wind is blowing in this direction with some velocity u, okay, and there is some pressure P in the wind. Now there is one central hole and there are these peripheral holes, okay, on the entire tube, on the surface of this tube. So there are two paths for the fluid to exert its pressure, okay. One path is this one and the other one is the outer one. So this outer tube feels the pressure from this wind here, from this fluid, and the inner tube feels the pressure of this one, the wind that is coming right onto this pitot, pitot tube. Okay. So due to these two different kinds of pressures, what happens is there is a fluid filled here in this tube, which is like a U-shaped tube. Usually, this central tube gives more pressure reading. So what happens is this fluid moves up on the right limb and goes down in the left limb of the tube. So there is a height difference, h. And from this reading h, you can measure the velocity of the fluid, the pressure in the fluid. Okay. How do you do that? So let's see this. So this hole that is there in front of the pitot tube, this central hole, actually the fluid velocity goes down to 0 at this point. So you can do this experiment also. Take a paper sheet, okay, make a hole in this sheet, make a bigger hole, and then blow some air or put it under a fan or a small fan, and then notice the velocity of the air on the other side. You will feel some velocity of air, but not as much as on the other side of the paper, which is facing the fan. Now make this hole even smaller. When you make the hole very small, you will feel almost no velocity of the air on the other side. So although the fluid can go inside, but still it loses all its momentum. Okay. So similar thing happens here also, and we can apply Bernoulli's equation to find out what the pressure is at this point, at this hole. So let us call this point 1 and let us call the point somewhere here as point 0. Okay. So now we can write the Bernoulli's equation between point 0 and point 1. P by rho g plus v square by 2g, and there is no height difference z, so we'll neglect that, is equal to, this is at point 0, p0 v0 p1 by rho g, and as we said, velocity at point 1 goes to almost 0, so plus 0. From this you can find out what is p at 1. P1 is P0 plus rho V naught square by 2. This is what you get. And then what about the pressure at point 2, this point? So the pressure that you get there is the actual pressure of the air, which is P0. Or what you can do is you can apply Bernoulli equation between this point, which is close to 0 because this device is very small. So you can consider this point as also 0. It will have the same properties as point 0 and point 2, and apply the Bernoulli equation for this streamline. So you will see that for both of them, velocity is almost the same. It is capital U. The fluid is flowing with the same velocity approximately. This small device doesn't change the velocity. So you will get the same pressure P naught at point 0 and point 2. So P2 will be P0. Now in this manometer that you have, this U tube, you get this height difference H, and you can calculate the force that is being applied by this extra fluid, which is the mass of that fluid that is raised in the tube times G times H. Okay, this is the energy. Or you can calculate the pressure because of this height H, which will be pressure will be rho gh. So this you can equate with the pressure difference P1 minus P2, which is rho V naught square by 2, and from here you get V naught, which is the velocity of the wind, which is what we wanted to find out. What is the velocity of the wind? V0 or capital U. Is this clear? How you calculate this velocity of the wind using this pitot tube? Is there any question? Okay. So this Venturi meter also follows a similar. So all of them use Bernoulli equation. Most of them. This is a Venturi. This is how a Venturi looks like. So you have two holes here. You have actually a narrow section and a wide section, and you have a manometer in between these two. So as we have seen earlier, from continuity equation, you can see that the velocity in the wider section will be less than the velocity in the narrow section. And from Bernoulli equation, you can again deduce that the pressure at point 2 and pressure at point 1, how they are related. So we have seen this earlier. Because velocity at point 2 is more than the velocity at point 1, therefore the pressure will be low. So something like this will happen. The fluid in the left limb will be higher, the level of the fluid, than the level of the fluid in the right limb. So from this pressure, rho gh, and by the way, when we write rho gh for this fluid, which I have marked with these lines, hatched lines, this rho is the density of this fluid, which is generally some other fluid, because otherwise how will you notice this height difference? This has to be a different fluid than this fluid that is flowing in the tube. So it is the density of this fluid, the hatched one, not the density of the flowing fluid. And here also, these two rho, although I have written same notation, but this rho is the rho of the fluid that is filled here in the tube. So if we use mercury, then this is rho Hg. Okay. So there will these two will not cancel out, rho Hg and rho. So here also we can say this is rho Hg, and then this will be equal to P1 minus P2. Okay. That's how uh, that's how you get the pressure difference, and also you get the relation between the velocity and the pressure by applying the Bernoulli equation along this straight line. Between P1 and P2 you will get P1 by rho g plus V1 square by 2g equals P2 by rho g plus V2 square by 2g, and you know the ratio of V1 and V2 from the continuity equation, because you know the cross sectional areas at point 1 and point 2. So you know that A1 V1 is equal to A2 V2. So how many unknowns are there? P1, P2, V1, V2, right? And from here you can get V1 in terms of V2. So there are only how many unknowns are there now? P1, P2 and V1, if you see these two equations. So how do you solve for all of them? You don't have to solve for all of them. You can club P1 minus P2, because this P2 will go to the left hand side. You get P1 minus P2 by rho g. So you can take P1 minus P2 as your unknown. This is some unknown, let's say omega, and this is some unknown omega. So now you have only two unknowns in these equations, omega and V. And from here you can calculate both of them from these two equations. Okay, is that clear? Now similar concept is used for an orifice meter. Instead of designing a converging channel, a diverging channel, or cones which are converging, diverging, all these things, if you want to avoid, what you do is, in a straight pipe, just put a plate with a central hole. Okay, it acts like a venturi. So the streamlines of the fluid they go like this. Okay, because they have to converge and then diverge. So the actual streamlines, they follow this venturi kind of path, and then you can measure the pressures in these two locations, and then again you will get a similar pattern. Okay, because this is a narrow section, because the streamlines are close together, so the velocity will increase at that cross section at point 2. Okay. So this is a simpler design. This is known as orifice meter, because a hole is known as an orifice. Similarly, rotameter, uh, what that is? So let's say you have a fluid flowing in a pipe. What you do is you make a vertical bend like this, and put a solid like this. This is a solid, and then again wherever you want to transport the fluid, you keep it like that. And you have markings here in this rotameter. So this section is known as the rotameter. Now what will happen is, because of the velocity of this fluid, This fluid will flow past this solid and it will lift this solid. Why will it lift it? Because there is some drag force being applied by the fluid on this solid. So FD is acting upwards and gravitational force mg is acting downwards. So for a fixed velocity, this block of solid will float somewhere at some value. Okay, and you will have a plot saying what is the velocity. So this will be calibrated. You will know the velocity of the fluid versus the readings that you have here, because FD will depend on the velocity. So V versus H, and you will have some graph. Okay, so whatever H uh, you are at, you can get the velocity of the fluid. Generally, these readings, they are not just heights of the rotameter, they are not just centimeters, they give you the actual flow rate. So it is written what is the flow rate here, how many milliliters or how many liters per minute, something like that. These readings will be in terms of the flow rate. So you can directly get the flow rate from this rotameter. Usually this is used uh, for gases, not for liquids. Then comes hot wire anemometer. Here, how do we measure the fluid's velocity? You have two um, electrodes, you can call it. In between them, you have a wire, a tungsten wire or some other kind of wire, which is heated. How is it heated? Because it is resistive, highly resistive. If you flow some current through it, it will get heated up. Okay. And then you put it in a flow field, generally air or some gas, which doesn't burn, otherwise it will catch fire. So you put it in the flow field, and then the resistance of this wire will decrease because of the flow, because of the convection of temperature. This air will carry the temperature or the heat from this wire with it, and the faster it carries the heat away, the faster the wire will cool down, and there will be some steady state that will be reached, because the wire is being heated by the current and the wind is carrying the heat away. So there will be some temperature at which this wire will come. Okay. And the resistivity of this wire is a function of temperature, which is already known. So this resistivity versus temperature curve, that is known already. So from this data, you can find out, you can calibrate this instrument and you can find out the velocity of the wind. Okay. So whatever the current resistivity of the wire is, according to that, you can tell what is the velocity of the wind. You just have to calibrate the instrument. Okay. And then there are modern methods. Uh, you can, what you can do is you can put some particles in a flow field. Okay. Let's say this is some flow past a ball or something inside a liquid. So you put some particles which are known as tracer particles, and they will flow along with the fluid. So as the fluid flows, these particles will flow with the fluid, and then you can shine a laser sheet on it so that the particles are illuminated, and then you can from with the help of a camera, you can take a snapshot at each time instant where the particles are. Then you can join the, let's say this particle is here at one time instant, the next time instant it goes here. So you can join these two and then you will find out the velocity vector from here. So like this you can visualize the entire flow field. So this method is known as PIV, particle image velocimetry. There are automated uh, softwares which can do this. You don't have to do it manually, that you connect the two points and then find out the velocity vector. It can be done automatically. You just have to take the images with the camera. Okay. So now there are some topics that we have left from the creeping flow. So now we are done with the fluid mechanics part. Now we move on to the mechanical operations part. Some part we have already discussed here, like pumps, fans, blowers, all these things. They lead to the mechanical operations part. So in mechanical operations, what we deal with is actually the applications of fluid mechanics in the chemical engineering industry or any other industry for that matter. So here one part is fluid moving machinery. Sometimes the fluids may be used in some processes to make the things flow. Okay, for example, let me give you an example. There is something called fluidization. This term gives an idea that you want to fluidize something that is not already a fluid. What does it mean and why is it used? This can be used for transport. You want to transport some solids, let's say, and you want to mix some fluid in it, right? But this term doesn't mean that you are mixing some fluid in some solids. This just means that you are trying to fluidize something, some solids. So let me give you an example that will make it clear. Let's say you have a furnace where you burn coal. Okay, you have coal here. In a thermal power plant, let's say, and then you will have these pipes containing water which is flowing, which will be converted to steam, which will turn a turbine. Okay, and it will generate electricity later on. So you want to burn this coal. How do you burn this coal? One way is to just light some fire here, put some burners inside. Okay, that is one way of doing it, but it is a very inefficient way because you have such large quantities of coal that this heat will not reach every part of the coal in this thing. So what is the other method? They use fluidization. What you do is you have blowers everywhere or at the bottom, and with very high velocity you flow some air, either hot gas or just atmospheric air at the atmospheric temperature. So what that will do is it will mix the coal. Okay, there will be coal particles flying around in the entire chamber. So the, let's say the fire that heats the bottom particles, after some time they will reach the top because you are fluidizing the entire coal. So now the coal has become like a fluid because you are blowing air with these blowers at the bottom. So these coal particles are moving around and this increases the efficiency of burning of coal. It will not happen that some coal at the bottom, uh, it starts burning, it reaches a very high temperature, but after some time there is no oxygen there. because there is no recirculation inside this coal. Okay, and some coal at the top is not burnt at all. So to avoid these things, to increase the efficiency of any reaction, actually, people use fluidization a lot in chemical industry or any other industry. So this is known as fluidization, and this is like a bed of coal. So this is also known as fluidized bed. This is a fluidized bed if you fluidize this coal bed. Okay, so that is one part that we discussed. We have not gone into the details, the equations and all that, how much velocity you need to give to actually fluidize it, how much, what is the limit of the velocity of the air that you should provide from the bottom so that the coal remains within this chamber, so that the coal particles just fly off to a certain extent and then they come back, because you don't want them to just fly off away somewhere, right? If the container is closed, it's fine, you can go to infinite speeds. You cannot in practical terms, but still, whatever velocity you want, you can give if the container is closed. But if it is open, you want the coal particles to go up and then come back. Otherwise, there is no meaning of fluidization. You will lose coal. All right. So mechanical operations. So you can see these are some of the mechanical operations. Fluidization. One is you want to separate uh, maybe some solid particles from a liquid. Maybe you have an ore, iron ore, or some other metal ore, and you want to separate the pure metal from its ore. So there you can mix it with some liquids. You can do some chemistry there, and then you want to separate the two fluids. So there can be liquid separation, air and particle separation. Maybe there is dust in the air, you want to purify it. How do you purify it? So all these things require the knowledge of fluid mechanics, which will be used here. So we'll discuss. So today we'll end here, but I'll send you the slides on these things so that you can read them on your own. And this is our last class. Now I'll send you just the recordings of this part, the mechanical operations part. So is there any question? And I'll send you the assignments also based on what we have discussed today and in the last classes also. Okay, that's it. Any questions? Okay, if not, we'll end here. Thank you.